The teacher explains that this field training is simple. All the first-class students only need to survive one night in the forest. Low-rank monsters have been released around the area, and each team leader has a magic paper that can activate a barrier and call for help. But there's one terrifying rule. The moment they use it, their party will be removed from the first class. At first, everyone thinks it will be easy. Even Levin, the arrogant noble in Oscar's group, acts like he can protect everyone. But after walking deeper into the forest, our guy senses something wrong. Before anyone can react, a strange magic circle activates beneath them, and the whole party is teleported away. When they open their eyes, they are no longer in the training zone. They are in the 5th graveyard, a dangerous place meant for senior students. Oscar immediately realizes this might be a trap and tells them to use the emergency paper, but Levin, being a complete idiot, tears it apart because he wants to use this chance to show off. At first, Levin and his lackeys managed to fight a few beasts using their proud noble teamwork. Levin made shields, the others fired spells, and they acted like this was some grand display of elite magic. But when one beast slipped past them and charged straight at Lily, Oscar stepped in and cut it down with a single fire blade. But later that night, the real nightmare comes. A giant dragon appears from the forest and everyone loses hope. Levin, the guy who kept bragging about protecting them, instantly hides inside an earth cocoon like a turtle and plans to survive alone. With no help, no escape, and a dragon preparing to burn them alive, Oscar steps forward. Instead of panicking, he studies how the dragon gathers mana for its breath. Then he uses that idea with his own magic theory, condensing mana like sword ki. The dragon fires its flames, but Oscar answers with one fire bullet and blasts straight through it, killing the dragon in a single shot. That's when they realized that the commoner they mocked is the truly dangerous one. Well, let's go back a bit to see how a mere 14-year-old can defeat a dragon. In this world, fighters must choose one of two paths. Become a mage who uses powerful supernatural magic, or become a swordsman who relies on overwhelming physical skill and sword techniques. Our guy Oscar chose the path of the sword. Since childhood, he trained relentlessly and eventually became a legendary sword saint, the highest rank a swordsman could reach. He was respected by everyone, defeated powerful monsters, and lived the kind of life most people could only dream about. But despite all his achievements, Oscar secretly regretted his decision. Deep down, he had always admired magic and wished he had become a mage instead. It all takes a dark turn when Oscar is ambushed by mysterious enemies, with the leader wearing a unique pendant. Even someone as powerful as him struggles because the attackers carefully planned everything. During the fight, his innocent disciple is dragged into the chaos, forcing Oscar to prioritize his disciple's life instead. As he reaches the end of his life, his greatest regret becomes painfully clear. He realizes that although he mastered the sword, he never truly understood magic, and that missing knowledge may have cost him everything. However, fate suddenly gives him another chance because instead of dying permanently, Oscar regresses back to his younger self with all his memories intact. Oscar looks around frantically, wondering how he is still alive, and he soon notices that he is back at his village. He sees 2 invitation letters, which are from the 2 academies he can choose from. Apparently, when one reaches the age of 15, they receive an envelope from the government and it contains invitations to both the Magic Academy and the Sword Academy. Once they have decided where to go, the candidates take the letter to the academy and are granted access. Seeing that he is receiving letters and he is close to the village, the realization that he has gone back to the past dawns on him. This was when he was 14 years old and hadn't chosen the path of a swordsman. Suddenly, a scary presence appears behind him, asking him what he is doing all alone there. Oscar turns around in shock to realize that it is his father, Brian, and this confirms the fact that he has truly returned to the past. Brian scolds him, telling him that he's been growing arrogant of late because he neglects his training more often, but little does the man know that Oscar isn't actually arrogant. At this time, he was contemplating whether he should reveal his desire for magic to his father. Apparently, Brian is a swordmaster who has several disciples under him, and the swordmaster rank is just below a sword saint and a sword emperor, which shows that he is quite proficient with the sword. Since he is a respected swordmaster, it is expected that his son would begin learning the way of the sword, and this was the case. His father made sure to praise him as he improved on his talent for the sword. One day, Oscar rushed back home to tell his father how someone showed him magic, and it was beautiful, but this was when things became clear to Oscar. Brian grabbed him, telling him that magic is only meant for the weak, and that Oscar is going to wield the sword. From that day forward, Oscar continued swinging his sword to make sure he was not abandoned by his father, but he couldn't let go of the sword, even though he really wanted to practice magic. In the end, he died at the hands of a mage, and because of this, he is determined to walk the path that he truly wants. Brian then reiterates the question, asking him why he has been neglecting his training, and Oscar lets him know that he's already spent a lifetime with the sword. Brian hears this, and his anger rises from the inside, causing him to unleash a massive sword aura with light swords surrounding him. The overwhelming pressure from Brian knocks those around him to the ground, but Oscar remains calm even under these intense circumstances. The others who are on the ground wonder how Oscar is able to stay this calm, even though Brian's aura is about to crush them. Seeing how calm his son is, Brian finally takes a step back and he admits that Oscar hasn't been playing around after all. He walks up to his son and he pats him on the shoulder, telling him that if he continues this way, he would be glad to entrust the guild to him. After saying this, he departs, and the 3 dudes with him rush over to Oscar to tease him, telling him that they have been looking forward to coming back home from the academy just so that they can spar with him. One of them is already volunteering to give Oscar a sword lesson, and Oscar remembers that the trio was his companions whom his father always asked him to spar with. When the trio entered the Sword Academy and awakened their sword Kai, they began giving Oscar sword lessons as if they were trying to vent all their past frustrations, and now they are back at it again. Oscar grabs a wooden sword and the dude excitedly tells him to take his stance. Basically, the presence or absence of sword ki creates a huge gap that swordsmanship alone cannot cover, and the trio knows this. Just then, Oscar shocks them and he turns around. He walks toward the lake and he thanks the sword for everything so far, but without hesitation, he throws the sword into the lake. As the sword sinks to the bottom of the lake, the trio laughs at him, believing that he is running away from them, which is why he ditched his sword. The dude, who wanted to spar with him, still proceeds to charge at him while calling him a disgrace to other swordsmen. Oscar turns around with a smile on his face, telling them that he is not going to wield the sword again because he has made the decision to become a mage. Nonetheless, the dude doesn't care, and he tells Oscar that he is not going to hold back just because he is unarmed. He swings his sword hard, but Oscar is able to read his movements. He realizes that the dude is using sword kai to enhance his body and movements, but this is just not enough. Oscar easily dodges the first strike while deciding to give the dude a lesson. He tells him that he must treat the blade as an extension of his own body and not just a tool, but this only gets the dude angrier. He screams at Oscar, telling him not to lecture him, and he starts swinging his sword frantically, but Oscar doesn't even raise his hand before dodging everything. Oscar soon realizes that he is already treating the dude like he is sparring with his disciple from his previous life. The frustration gets to the dude and he begins to scream, wondering why he can't even land a single hit. Oscar decides to put him out of his misery, and all it takes is a push to the head to send him on his butt. Oscar finishes the job by punching the dude on the head, knocking him to the ground completely. The dude couldn't even walk by himself and his brothers had to help him. After they are gone, Oscar stares at the dude's sword, which is stuck in the ground, and he remembers how his father forced him to forcibly awaken his sword ki in his past life. Oscar figures out that he has to master magic first to avoid the same thing from happening. Oscar then heads into the deep forest, where he believes no one would see him. He finds a rock where he can sit, and he remembers once asking a mage, Lily, in his past life, how he could use magic. Oscar knows that swordsmen refine energy within their bodies to enhance themselves or their weapons, but he has always wondered how mages do their thing. Lily takes a minute to think about it, and she chooses the best way that she can explain. She picks up a watering can and starts watering her flowers, revealing that magic is similar to using a watering can to nourish plants. She adds that mana is invisible to the naked eye, but it is something that exists naturally and it fills the atmosphere. By circulating the mana through one's circuits and pouring it into a magic formula, it gives birth to a spell. Lily explained this with so much enthusiasm back then, and now that Oscar finally needs the knowledge, he sits down on the rock to absorb everything. Since he was told that mana is just like air and it is everywhere, he believes that if he can just perceive the mana, he would be able to draw it into his circuits. When it comes to a swordsman, they use all of their senses to survive countless brushes with death, and even though he is no longer a sword saint, the senses he had honed in his past life remain in his body. Because of this, Oscar is convinced that he should be able to feel the invisible flow of mana, and after a moment's concentration, he finally sees mana in the form of beautiful purple threads all around him. Oscar's face lights up in excitement when this happens because he has finally been able to see mana, and he realizes that all that is left for him is to draw it into his circuits. Suddenly, it dawns on him that he doesn't even know how to draw it into his circuits because he didn't bother asking. He leaps off the rock and notices that there is something strange going on in the distance because he can see dense mana in the area. Oscar proceeds into the dark area, and he is surprised that there is not a single living thing in the area. Something strange suddenly lands in front of him, causing him to duck, and when the dust clears, he sees a freaking golem standing above him. Oscar panics, wondering why there is a golem in the area, and out of nowhere, a redhead mage appears from above. She graciously lands on the golem's shoulder while asking Oscar what business he has at her workshop. The question soon gets serious as the golem switches into combat mode with its eyes glowing, and the mage asks Oscar if he is after her research results. She tells Oscar to think well before giving his answer because his life is attached to his answer. Oscar stares intently at the mage because she is someone he has heard countless rumors about on the battlefield. She is considered a hero whose main theater of war was the harsh and frozen north, and she is known as the one-woman army with a golem. She was a hero who commanded a golem capable of matching 1,000 soldiers, the Mage of Creation, Isabel. Before Oscar knows it, he is dragged into Isabel's hideout, and his hands are chained up while Isabel questions him. Oscar never thought he would run into Isabel this way, and Isabel demands to know which faction Oscar belongs to. Oscar is still overwhelmed by the whole thing, and this vexes Isabel, who wants answers. She unleashes a magic circle underneath him, demanding that he speak or regret it. Oscar screams in fear, telling Isabel to chill out because he obviously didn't resist when she captured him earlier, which means he is not her enemy. This only gets Isabel madder, and she grabs her wand to conjure a fireball as she prepares to send Oscar off. She calls him a nameless mage, and this is when Oscar screams out, telling Isabel that he is not even a mage yet. Isabel is taken aback in shock when she hears this, and she assumes that he is lying. She grabs his head and looks into his circuits, only to realize that he is telling the truth because there is no mana in his circuits. After this, the two sit down for a drink, and Isabel lets Oscar know that he won't be getting an apology, so he should throw the thought out of his mind. Isabel mentions that she just started her position as a professor at the academy, and she is already being targeted by everyone close to her. Oscar is shocked when he learns that Isabel is already a professor at the Magic Academy. Isabel proudly replies that she decided to become a professor because she believes that it is going to help with her golem research. Oscar realizes that a golden chance has just fallen on his lap because if he gets to study under her while she is teaching at the academy, he might finally be able to channel mana into his circuits. Oscar then makes the bold move of asking Isabel to teach him how to manifest mana in his body. Isabel straight up tells him that she is not interested in someone who is as weak and talentless as him. Isabel tells him to finish his drink and get lost afterwards, but Oscar knows that he can't allow this chance to pass him by. Just then, Isabel asks for a refill of her drink from her serving golem, while Oscar is busy wondering how he is going to convince Isabel. Suddenly, he notices an abnormality in the golem's right shoulder and he stands up to tell Isabel that her golem is behaving strangely. Isabel yells at him in anger, asking him if he is spouting trash just to get her attention, but she hasn't finished the statement when the golem spills the tea on her head. Oscar panics, and he rushes over to check on Isabel because the tea is obviously hot. He asks her if she is fine, and he mentions that the circuits near the golem's right shoulder are clogged. Isabel finally calms down to check it out, and she realizes that he is right. She asks him how he knows that her golem is malfunctioning. She gets even more curious, and she grabs his arm, asking him how he knows that it was broken, and he replies that he could see that the mana flow looked unnatural. This is when it dawns on Isabel that it appears that Oscar can see the mana in the atmosphere. Oscar remembers that the mage actually told him that mana is invisible, and Oscar replies that he can see mana. Isabel expresses her surprise, saying this is why Oscar was able to break through her barrier, and this is because her barriers work by interfering with the invisible mana in the air to produce their effects. Oscar starts wondering if this is what the evil mage who killed him meant by talent. After giving it a quick thought, Isabel smiles, telling Oscar that she is going to teach him how to use mana. Oscar is shocked to hear this because moments earlier, she was about to throw him out. Isabel tells him that what she said is that she doesn't care about weak and incompetent men, but as it stands, Oscar has been able to pique her interest. The two shake hands on this, and without wasting time, Isabel takes Oscar to her lecture room, where she has two golems hold a teaching board for her to draw her explanatory notes. Isabel tells Oscar that as long as he is alive, mana is being absorbed into his body naturally, and Oscar gets even more curious about how he is supposed to make it flow through his circuits. Isabel then decides to make an example of this by telling Oscar that he obviously cannot pour tea if he doesn't have a cup, and mana only flows through circuits once a magic formula is introduced. Isabel whips out a magic scroll that has been inscribed with a specific spell, which is the same one she hands out to first years at the academy. Oscar collects the scroll with all curiosity, asking Isabel what kind of magic it is. Isabel decides not to tell him, letting him know that it is a surprise till after he succeeds. Isabel tells him to feel the power circulating inside him and visualize pouring it into the formula in his hand. She asks him if he can do this, and Oscar excitedly tells her that he is going to give it a shot. Deep down, Isabel knows that the task she gave him is something that takes at least a month, but she expects him to be able to do it in 2 weeks if he is really talented. Oscar places the scroll on the ground, and he follows Isabel's instruction to feel the power circulating inside him. He likens this to just when he is refining his sword kai, so he just needs to focus his awareness inward. Oscar closes his eyes and he lets the mana flow through him until it passes into the formula. Just as she said, the mana ignites the formula on the scroll, giving rise to a bright light. Basically, learning mana is like learning to walk on new legs, and no one is born knowing how to walk. One will have to fall times without number, and it is only after understanding how to move one's body that one can finally stand on one's own. Isabel sees Oscar pass the test in minutes, and she freezes up in shock. It is said that those at the top of the magic world get to learn mana faster than anyone else, but she never expected Oscar to learn it on his first try. She wonders if it is because Oscar can see mana in the atmosphere, but she quickly trashes the thought because this alone cannot explain what just happened. However, she cannot help but accept the reality that standing in front of her is an overwhelming talent. Isabel rushes over to pat him on the back, commending him for being able to activate the magic formula on his very first try. Suddenly, Oscar's excitement dies down and he tells Isabel that what he just did isn't good enough. Isabel is confused, and Oscar tells her that what he just did isn't beautiful. He remembers the magic that was shown to him when he was a kid and talks about how beautiful it is compared to what he just did. He points to the formula saying it is not right, and he lets Isabel know that just like the golem's shoulder, it feels really off. He turns to Isabel, asking her what she thinks about it, but Isabel is so overwhelmed that she can't even give a proper answer. Oscar then mentions that he has realized the simple truth, and it is not that he just wants to be a mage, but he wants to be a mage who can cast perfect and beautiful magic. His eyes light up in excitement while saying this, and Isabel tells him that he should have just rewritten the magic formula if he thought there was something off about it. Oscar rushes over to Isabel, asking her how he gets to draw magic formulas. Later on, Brian is walking through the house when he notices that Oscar's companions are all lying down weak, and he approaches them, asking them what the issue is. The trio freaks out, trying to change the subject, but Brian maintains the question, asking them what happened. The trio then reveals that Oscar was able to defeat all of them pretty easily. Brian finds this hard to believe, and he walks off, telling them to treat their injuries so it doesn't mess with their next day's schedule. Unknown to them, Brian is smiling with pride because he believes that it is finally time for him to grant his son his sword key. Meanwhile, Oscar is learning under Isabel's guidance, and he is blown away by the amount of knowledge that is required to properly use magic. Isabel tells him that he actually has a talent for it, and if he wants more books, she is free to lend them to him. Oscar is excited when he hears this, and he asks her if she is sure, to which she says yes. She boasts about how everything she knows is inside the books, so he is free to take as many as he likes. She soon regrets this statement because Oscar doesn't waste time packing almost every book he can get his hands on. Isabel tries to fight back, but he reminds her that she was the one who told him to take as many as he likes. Just then, Isabel tells Oscar that there is something he needs to know, and it is a warning. She tells him that now that he has housed mana within his circuits and he is officially a mage, he has to be careful with how he is going to handle sword key or else he is going to lose his life. In his past life, Oscar had visited his village when his father was on his sickbed and was about to die. His father had called him closer and whispered in his ear that he could finally confirm that he has talent for magic. At this point, Brian believes that it was a mistake to have made his son give up on magic. However, this time around, Oscar is ready to walk up to his father to bravely ask him to sign his letter for the Magic Academy. Later that night, Oscar finds his father, and he holds the letter in his hand. His father asks him what he wants, and Oscar tells Brian that he is there to have him sign his application. Brian collected the application and was expecting to see the Sword Academy, but instead saw the Magic Academy application. With a smile on his face, Oscar tells his father that he cannot enroll in the Magic Academy without his signature. Brian holds his head in frustration, asking his son why he chose magic when he was born as the son of a swordmaster. Oscar then asks his father if he remembers when he told him that he wanted to use magic. Brian throws the letter on the floor, telling Oscar that his desire was nothing but childish nonsense. Brian proceeds to touch his son, aiming to infuse the sword key into him, but he is repelled by the mana flowing inside Oscar. Brian exclaims in shock, asking Oscar if he has mastered mana, and Oscar tells Brian that he proceeded with this because he didn't think there was any other way he could persuade him. Brian is utterly pissed when he hears this, and he mentions that he heard that Oscar defeated his brothers. Brian tells Oscar that he possesses an immense talent to have been able to defeat a swordsman without using sword key. Oscar assures his father that he is aware of this, but Brian argues with him, saying he clearly doesn't know. Brian screams out in frustration, telling Oscar that his success is guaranteed as long as he becomes a swordsman. Oscar tells his father he is right, but lets him know that success doesn't necessarily bring happiness. Brian grabs his head in frustration and immediately loses his patience. He realizes that if he acts pretty fast, he might still be able to fix the error. He tells Oscar that he is not going to stand aside and watch him follow the wrong path because he is simply going to beat some sense into him. Brian draws his sword, telling Oscar that he might not understand what he is trying to do for him now, but he is pretty sure that a day will come when he will thank him. Oscar gently mumbles because he knows that this day never came, and his decision to learn swordsmanship even led to his death. Brian then tells Oscar to grab his sword, but Oscar takes a deep breath before dumping the Sword Academy application into the fire, while reminding his father that he is a mage. He straight up dares his father, telling him that he is curious to see if he can beat out his desire to become a mage. Brian decides to show Oscar what he is capable of because he believes his son is acting all arrogant just because he was able to withstand his sword key. Brian dashes toward Oscar and delivers a powerful strike, but Oscar dodges the strike, shocking Brian. Basically, Oscar is able to read his father's attacks pretty clearly, as he was holding the sword in his hands. Brian continues swinging, but Oscar dodges everything thrown at him because he basically modeled himself after his father in his past life, so it is easy for him to read his attacks. Moments later, Brian takes a break from attacking, and he tells Oscar that he can clearly see that he is living up to his words. Brian admits that Oscar dodged well, even without using sword kai to strengthen his body, because he is confident that there is no single person in the guild who can do the same. Brian tells Oscar that his talent for the sword is immense, which is why he is betting everything on him to pick the path of being a swordsman. Brian's aura starts leaking out to show how serious he is, and he urges Oscar to accept his sword kai right at that moment, but Oscar reminds him that he was the one who said he was going to beat the magic desire out of him. Oscar smiles, asking his father if he is asking him to yield just because he cannot hit him. And this gets to Brian. Oscar proceeds, telling his father that, as talent is more important than anything to him, he also has things that he cannot give up on. Oscar then whips out his wand and his father scoffs, asking him if he plans to use this as his sword. Oscar proudly tells his father that what he is holding is his wand, even though it is just for beginners. Even though he doesn't have the knowledge to use magic yet, he believes that the same goes for his father. This basically means that he has no idea what he is about to do, so there is no way he is going to predict it. Brian dashes toward Oscar and he increases his movements to get the chance to get behind Oscar, but before he lands his strike, Oscar reacts to it and he dodges the attack. With his father right in the open, Oscar points the wand in his face, and he decides to use the first magic that he ever saw, which is the same he has dreamed of countless times. The magic is a spark, and thanks to his unending desire, he is able to pull this off. He unleashes a bright spark in his father's face that almost blinds him. While his eyes are closed, Oscar has taken the opportunity to reach his back. Brian reacts instinctively, believing that the magic attack is meant to be a distraction. However, Oscar counters this by getting behind his father, and he knocks off his sword, ultimately disarming him. Brian expresses his frustration, and he asks Oscar if his goal was to take his sword away from the very start. Oscar reminds his father that hiding his true objective amidst multiple aims is what his father taught him. Brian tells Oscar that he can guarantee his talent with the sword, but he wants to know who is going to guarantee talent for magic, and Oscar tells his father that he only showed him the path that he wished to walk. Oscar asks his father if he became a swordsman because someone guaranteed his talent for the sword, and this question hits Brian really hard. Brian remembers a conversation he had with Oscar's mother when he was still in the womb. Brian talked about how he wanted to put his son on the path of swordsmanship, and his wife reminded him that he chose swordsmanship because he believed that it was cool, but they, on the other hand, don't need to choose for their son. She tells Brian that Oscar has to choose his own path. After the memory flashes through his head, Brian smiles and expresses his deepest desire that he actually thought Oscar would one day become a sword saint. Brian walks to where he dropped the Magic Academy application, and Oscar fears that he wants to tear it up. However, Brian shocks him, revealing his intention to sign the application. Meanwhile, at the academy, the professors are meeting concerning the new students, and they all come to the same conclusion that the students are exceptional. One of the professors is a strange dude who has the same unique pendant as the one who killed Oscar around his neck and admits that the New Year students are all impressive. At the same time, Oscar is busy studying really hard at home. 6 months later, Oscar finally prepares to leave for the academy, and his father stands outside to see him off. He lets him know that just as he has learned the sword, there are likely many who have spent their time refining their magic. He tells Oscar that he is in no position to speak, but he urges Oscar never to stray from the path that he chose for himself. Oscar smiles, assuring his father that he is going to be fine because there is obviously no one who is more terrifying than his father. Brian smiles and heaves a sigh of relief when he hears this. Once they are done with their father and son moment, Oscar turns around to leave. Oscar wears a big smile because he can finally attend the Magic Academy that he has always wanted. Soon afterward, Oscar arrives at the Imperial Kirk Magic Academy, and he is blown away by how different everything is. There are students flying around on brooms, and there are miniatures walking around playing musical instruments. Oscar is left in complete astonishment because the academy is completely different from the Sword Academy. He walks up to the miniatures, wondering what principle makes them work even though they look similar to a golem. He is in the middle of this when Isabel shows up behind him, telling him that he is going to be late for his enrollment procedures if he continues observing the miniatures. Oscar gets up in excitement as he is happy to see his master, and Isabel asks him if he hasn't been slacking off while she was away. Oscar proudly tells her that he can do much more than he could do 6 months earlier. Isabel lets him know that she will be looking forward to this, so she urges him to make sure he surprises her just like before. Isabel then points to the distance, telling Oscar that the first-class selection exam is being held over there. Oscar asks her what she means by this, and she tells Oscar that the new students are divided into 2 classes based on whether or not they possess mana. However, above these 2 is a class where the exceptionally gifted students are gathered, and this is the first class. Isabel tells Oscar that the exam is simply a means of sorting talent. Nonetheless, Isabel advises Oscar to avoid taking the exam, and Oscar curiously asks her why she is saying this. Isabel tells Oscar that the students who make it into the first class are all monsters because they are all elites who have been raised with magic since their early childhood. Hearing this, Oscar only gets excited because this means that he can learn advanced magic there, and Isabel grabs her head in frustration because she's come to the realization that trying to change Oscar's mind is pretty useless. Isabel then tells him that he is free to go and check it if he is curious, and Oscar walks over to where the exam is being taken. Upon getting there, he sees the current candidate shoot down a bunch of balloons with his magic, and Oscar realizes that the exam revolves around hitting the target with magic. Nonetheless, Oscar gets the strange feeling that he is being watched by everyone. Suddenly, he is approached by a rude white-haired noble kid, Zazan Gilosis, who tells him that he has no business being at the selection exam since he is a commoner. He tells him to leave, and Oscar argues with him, saying he heard that any student can be accepted. But Zazan berates Oscar, telling him that he knows how to run his mouth. Oscar finally understands what Isabel was trying to say because he has seen it firsthand that whoever is not a noble suffers discrimination. Zazan pushes Oscar aside, saying he is the next in line, so he should just stay quiet and watch him. The professor in charge, Ruth, puts up the test parameters. Zazan boastfully tells Oscar that the first class is a place for those who have dedicated everything to magic since their youth, and he wants Oscar to witness the difference of the said years. Zazan unleashes his overwhelming ice magic that freezes up all the targets, leaving the students in complete shock. They start glazing Zazan, praising his family's house, talking about how powerful the house of Gilosis is. Some even believe that Zazan has not yet displayed his full power, and hearing the roar behind him, Zazan confidently walks up to Oscar, telling him that he finally understands that someone like him who cannot use decent magic is not welcome. Oscar answers Zazan, telling him that his magic is pretty impressive as he finally gets to see the magic of someone who has poured everything into magic. However, he confidently tells Zazan that everything he just witnessed is a waste, and this shocks Zazan. Oscar walks past Zazan because he is someone who understands the weight of effort and time really well. Oscar was actually worried that he might not be able to get into the first class, but with what he had just witnessed, he could not help but thank Zazan for giving him the confidence that he needed. Oscar whips out his wand and the other students start mocking him, saying he is using a beginner's wand, so there is no way he can aim at the targets with this. Zazan, on the other hand, is worried because of what Oscar just said since his magic is supposed to be perfect. This gets Zazan thinking about what he might have done wrong because he believes that there shouldn't be a flaw in his ice magic. Zazan soon brushes this aside because he is confident that he is above Oscar and shouldn't worry himself with whatever he thinks. Ruth, on the other hand, is impressed with Zazan's magic, and she finally understands why all the professors agreed that the year's new students are impressive. Ruth believes that Zazan already has one leg in the race for the freshman representative. Just then, Ruth notices that Oscar hasn't made his move for a while, and this leaves her wondering what he is doing. The students who are watching are already trash-talking him, screaming at him to give up. But Ruth soon gets the idea that Oscar is waiting for something because she is not even feeling any anxiety or impatience from Oscar. Once Oscar is done analyzing everything he wants to, he activates a fire bullet spell. The fire bullet travels at an incredible speed, and it cuts through the targets in one single strike. All the targets crash to the ground, shocking Ruth because the attack was so fast that the other students couldn't even see anything. They are all wondering what happened, and even though Oscar was able to hit all 5 targets, the students cannot admit that Oscar did something good, since there are only tiny holes in the targets. They even condemn him, saying he definitely didn't pass with this. Zazan also turns back to leave in disappointment because he was expecting Oscar to use overwhelming magic. Oscar then turns to Ruth, asking her if he has failed the exam, but Ruth confidently tells him that he passed without question, since he hit all 5 targets. Ruth then asks Oscar why he didn't just aim for the targets one by one, since he is capable of doing this. Ruth doesn't want to hear that it is a fluke, and Oscar tells Ruth that Zazan's magic is definitely impressive, but at the same time, he realizes that it was just a waste to use that much mana. Ruth is shocked when Oscar considers what Zazan did a waste of mana. Oscar explains that since the exam was a practical one, assuming combat against monsters, this is why he thought it would be better to suppress mana consumption with the battlefield in mind, and this explanation blows Ruth's mind. Ruth apologizes for delaying Oscar and tells him that he can leave. As Oscar walks off, Ruth is left in complete awe because Oscar had the vision to read the movements of the targets while possessing the courage to wait for the perfect moment. As if this is not enough, he also has the mana control to strike exactly as aimed. Ruth admits that Oscar's magic is not flashy, but it is also not a difficult one. All Ruth can see when looking at him is someone of incredible talent. At the same time, Oscar is thinking about how impressive Ruth's magic was because she was able to make several targets move independently. Suddenly, Oscar senses that there is someone watching him, and with a stern voice, he demands to know who it is. A voice appears out of nowhere, commending Oscar for noticing him. Just then, an old man appears above him, and he introduces himself as Balsamus, the headmaster of the academy. Oscar immediately bows his head to the old man, apologizing for his rudeness because he never knew who he was. Balsamus assures him that it is fine because he was the one who was eavesdropping in the first place. Suddenly, Oscar spots the strange pendant on the headmaster's neck, and he immediately recognizes it. Balsamus notices the hesitation in his movements, and he asks Oscar if there is anything wrong. Balsamus stretches his hands toward Oscar, telling him to offer his greetings. Oscar reluctantly stretches his hand, and just as he is about to take the headmaster's hand, he senses an attack brewing under him, and he immediately leaps backward to dodge the attack. Balsamus is impressed that he dodged the attack, and he tells him that his perception is pretty sharp. Balsamus levitates in the air to get the advantage over Oscar, and Oscar frantically asks him if he is there to kill him while whipping out his wand to prepare for an attack. Balsamus teases Oscar, asking him if he thinks he can take him down with such a small wand. Balsamus then unleashes a powerful wind magic that traps Oscar, and the moment Oscar senses this, he realizes that there is no way out. Instead of panicking or trying to break free, he decides to do something else. He casts a fire spell, and he goes directly for Balsamus, forcing him to block the fire magic to let down his barrier. Balsamus is completely astonished by this because he could see the route that Oscar took. Balsamus completely dispels his barrier, and Oscar crashes to his knees in exhaustion. Balsamus descends to his level, asking him if he is already out of spells, while pointing out the fact that he would have died if he wasn't testing him. Oscar sighs weakly before asking Balsamus what his end goal is because there is no way he put him through such a test, just for the fun of it. Balsamus commends Oscar for noticing this, and he starts explaining that there are many in the academy who see magic as a special privilege. Balsamus tells Oscar that he simply wants him to experience the reality of things for himself. However, with how things turned out, he could see that he actually underestimated the extent of his true potential. Oscar finally gets the hang of what the headmaster is saying, and this is basically telling him that if he stands out too much, he is going to be targeted just like what just happened. Balsamus tells him that this is exactly what he is talking about, revealing that there are extremists who do not tolerate the presence of talented commoners. This reminds Oscar of what the mages who killed him said. They had told Oscar that he had too much talent, and they could not overlook his talent. Oscar then asks the headmaster to tell him who they are, and Balsamus takes a deep breath before telling Oscar that knowing their identities would only put him in danger. Balsamus tells him that he should just focus on gaining the power to protect himself within the academy. This statement hits him really deep because he realizes that he would have died if Balsamus were after his life. Oscar then decides to ask the headmaster about the pendant on his neck, and he reveals that it is proof that one is a magic saint. This revelation shocks Oscar because the magic saint is a title that indicates the highest rank a mage can get, just like a sword saint. As he prepares to leave, Balsamus drops a badge in his hand, telling him not to lose it because it is going to be useful to him very soon. As he leaves, Oscar finally gets to see how powerful the headmaster is because there is no single disturbance in his mana. At the same time, it dawns on him that he just can't stand around getting all impressed. He had thought learning magic in this life was enough, but after realizing that a magic saint was part of those who killed him, he figured out that there was a possibility that they would target him in this life too. Since this is the case, Oscar comes to the clear decision that he has to surpass the man he was as the Sword Saint. Later on in the classroom, for the first class, Zazen hears some of the students talking about Oscar and the fact that he is the first commoner to have joined the first class. Zazen cuts in, telling them that Oscar is a mere commoner and he is going to be weeded out pretty soon. He hasn't even finished the statement when Oscar enters the classroom, shocking Zazen and those who didn't expect him to make the cut. After the meeting with the headmaster, Oscar headed to his dorm room to train in an attempt to increase the amount of mana his circuits can absorb. As time went on, he realized that the duration he can maintain is growing longer. Oscar wishes that he could get an opportunity to gain some combat experience. As he steps into the classroom, and with every eye on him, Oscar realizes that this is the first time he has truly gotten the urge to actually get stronger. Oscar and Zazen lock eyes, and Oscar can see the disgust in Zazen's face. Oscar is not surprised to have run into Zazen because he was expecting that he would actually meet him in the classroom. Just then, he notices a familiar presence sitting in the back, and this is none other than Lily. Oscar walks to where she is and helps her pick up her bookmark that was lying on the ground. With a bright smile as always, Lily collects the bookmark and thanks Oscar for the assist. Oscar can see the flower on the bookmark and subtly mentions Lily's love for flowers. Lily hears him, and when she asks him what he said, he quickly twists, saying he was only thinking about the beautiful flower. He introduces himself to Lily and asks if he can sit next to her, and she happily accepts, while introducing herself as Lily Lowell. Suddenly, a strange voice cuts through the room, addressing the students who have fully gathered. The students all get up in curiosity, wondering what is happening. Suddenly, a person's image appears in front, and this turns out to be Ruth, the professor who supervised the selection exam. Ruth tells the students that she is going to be in charge of the first-class group. Oscar is completely shocked because he didn't expect Ruth to be the one handling the class. Ruth then mentions just what Oscar wanted to hear by telling them that starting from the following week, they are going to be participating in combat lessons against monsters. She mentions that they are going to participate in field training, and the moment Oscar hears this, he lets out a big smile because he is about to get the combat experience he really wanted. Ruth tells the students that to ensure that the combat strength of each group is balanced, they are going to be forming parties of 5. The students start assuming what she means by combat strength, and Ruth tells them that they are going to measure this by the performance of their circuits. This simply means that the total amount of mana that their body can possess will be measured. One of the students asked her how she plans to measure this, and Ruth smiled, saying she has already completed the measurements. Suddenly, the students see light bulbs hovering over their heads, and Ruth tells them that the intensity of the light indicates their total mana capacity. Most of the students have bright lights above their heads, and with this, Ruth can see that there are several high-level students in the class. She decides to check on Oscar, but his mana sphere is pretty dim compared to others. The other students waste no time making fun of him, ultimately saying he is trash because he is a commoner after all. With this, the students believe that no one would be ready to form a party with him, but Oscar, on the other hand, is not even bothering himself with this. Just then, Lily taps him, asking him if he would like to join their party, and Oscar asks her if she is really sure about this. Lily says yes, because she believes that anyone who loves flowers is a good person. However, she tells Oscar that she has to ask the party leader, Levin Aldrit, first. Levin turns out to be a red-headed noble, and after assessing Oscar, he agrees to add Oscar to their party, claiming that it is a noble's duty to protect the weak. Levin tells Oscar that he will have him tag along as a luggage carrier. Moments later, Lily notices how the other students are staring at Oscar like he is some kind of disease, and she urges Oscar not to let this get to him. She mentions that nobles like her have been learning magic since a young age, so it is only natural that there is a bit of difference. Oscar assures her that he is fine because he is just glad that he was able to join her party, and Lily asks him how long he's been studying magic. Lily almost loses her mind when Oscar tells her that he only started learning about half a year ago. Lily stands there panting in shock, while Oscar just wonders what is wrong with her. After class, Zazen approaches Ruth to talk to her. Ruth asks him what the issue is, and Zazen asks Ruth why there is a commoner in their class. He mentions that Oscar can't even use a decent spell, and his mana capacity is trash, which basically means an amateur like him won't be able to keep up in the first class. Ruth smiles when she hears this and tells Zazen something shocking. She tells Zazen that Oscar just started studying magic about half a year ago, and the moment Zazen hears this, his eyes light up in shock. Ruth boastfully tells Zazen that Oscar has great potential, and in a few months he might be the one making the remarks that Zazen is currently making. Ruth walks off, telling Zazen that the aim of weeding out amateurs is why the field training is essential, so he has nothing to worry about. On the other hand, Lily is busy explaining the ranks of magic to Oscar. The ranks go from Magic Apprentice to Magic Adept, to Magic Tier, to Magic Sovereign, to Magic Saint. Lily lets him know that most nobles already possess mana at the Magic Adept level or higher, thanks to training from a young age. Oscar knows that the Magic Adept level is the rank usually summoned for actual monster subjugation, and if it is only mana capacity, he believes that it is impressive for the students to have reached the level at their current age. However, Lily argues with him, telling him that he is actually the impressive one because reaching the Magic Apprentice level in just 6 months is unheard of. This leaves Oscar wondering if this is also part of his talent. He still doesn't want to admit that he is just insanely good, and he gives all the credit to his master. Oscar then asks Lily about her relationship with Levin, and Lily reveals that Levin's family is a prestigious, high noble house with a long history. She reveals that the surrounding families follow them, seeking their protection, and Oscar concludes that Lily's family is one of them. Lily tells Oscar that Levin might appear like an asshole, but she promises Oscar that Levin is going to protect them when the time is right. Deep down, Oscar doesn't even want anyone to protect him because he wants the combat experience. The week of the field training finally arrives, and the students are gathered at the rendezvous point. Ruth shows up with another professor, with an eye patch, Eamon, to explain everything concerning the field training. Ruth tells them that low-rank monsters have been released into the forest, and their task for the training is to survive a night in the forest. She tells them that magic papers have been distributed to each team leader, and they are imbued with a defensive barrier and a signal flare spell. She tells them that if they find themselves in danger, they are to use the paper. The students hear this, and they start smiling because they all conclude that this is going to be a piece of cake. Just then, Ruth tells them that whichever party does this will be demoted from the first class, and the smile immediately fades from their faces. Seeing how the mood instantly shifted, Oscar realizes that staying in the first class is pretty important to the nobility. Levin confidently assures his group members that as long as he is there won't be a case of withdrawal because he is going to protect all of them. Once they are prepared, Levin dumps a huge load on Oscar, telling him to carry it. Lily tries to tell Levin that the luggage is plenty, but Oscar tells her not to worry about it because this was the deal. Oscar humbly carries the luggage and Levin laughs at him, saying he likes it when people know their place, but he still warns Oscar not to hold him back. A while later, the same Levin, who was boasting, is already panting because of how far they have trekked. However, he blames this on the terrain, and when Oscar tried to help him up, he pushed him aside because of his ego. After this awkward incident, they continue with the journey, and Oscar figures out that they have not run into any monsters whatsoever because the area is managed by the Academy. Suddenly, Oscar senses a mana abnormality and he screams at Levin to come to a halt. However, Levin yells back at him, asking him who the hell he is ordering around. Levin proceeds stubbornly, and he ends up activating a magic circle that affects space just like the one at Isabel's workshop. Before they know it, the space cracks and the students freak out. Even the stubborn Levin yells for his mommy, but Oscar remains calm as he tells his party members to prepare their wands because they are about to be transported through the magic circle. After the dust settles, Lily realizes that they've been teleported to another forest. She carefully looks around, and to her horror, it turns out to be the 5th graveyard. The other team members are shocked to hear this because this area is reserved for training seniors. Another dude questions how they got to a place like this when they are merely freshmen. Oscar wonders if the magic circle was a trap set by someone. He notes it might be the same group who murked him in his past life. Since this situation can be considered an emergency, Oscar suggests using the magic paper to call for help. However, Levin, who had crowned himself captain, suddenly rips the magic paper, leaving them stunned. When questioned why he did it, Levin confidently declares that Oscar is just exaggerating the situation. He boasts that they simply stepped on a teleportation circle that the Academy forgot to remove. He also assures them that stuff like this happens all the time, but Oscar remains skeptical about his claims. However, Levin assures them that this is an opportunity for them to make a name for themselves. He hopes that successfully clearing this training will give him some rep and get him good grades. After boasting, he confidently takes charge, leading his team to their unknown doom. His dumb teammates eagerly agree to follow him because of his reputation as the heir to the noble Aldrich family. Oscar can't believe how stupid they are, while Lily tells him to stay close to her for his own protection. He has no choice but to follow them, knowing they might soon just be monster chow. A few moments later, Oscar senses danger as a horde of beasts emerges from the shadows. However, instead of being afraid, Levin is excited to see them. Oscar, on the other hand, is a bit uneasy, but he still prepares to face them. This is because he has been looking forward to gaining real combat experience. Besides, there's a spell he plans to test out, so this is a good opportunity for him. Unfortunately, before Oscar can make any moves, Levin blocks his path, telling him to back off. He smugly claims that he will show Oscar how nobles fight and advises him that the fight is not for commoners. Oscar is confused and wonders what the brat means by how nobles fight. As soon as the beasts charge forward, Levin pulls out his magic wand. He confidently slams it to the ground to activate the Earth Shield Shell magic. The spell raises a giant boulder in front, separating them from the beasts. Levin uses this to buy some time and orders his teammates to back him up. One of them casts a wind spear spell, while the other casts a water spear spell, and they work together to take out the beast on the other side of Levin's rock formation. At the same time, Oscar watches quietly as they work together. He notes that Levin takes care of the defense while the others handle the offensive magic. He finally understands that this is what Levin meant when he was talking about how nobles fight. However, Oscar figures that this is how all mages fight, not just nobles. While Oscar is observing the fight, Levin and his team are getting overwhelmed by the beasts. One of the beasts even escapes their defense and charges towards Lily. It also gets past Levin, heading straight for Lily, but fortunately, Oscar steps in just in time. He uses the Fireblade spell and with a single strike defeats the beast, saving Lily. Afterwards, Lily thanks Oscar for saving her, and at the same time, they notice that Levin and his team have also finished handling the beasts. The other guys are completely wiped out except for Levin, who only handled a measly defense magic. Later that night, the group decided to camp in the forest. Levin continues to roast Oscar for being a commoner and mentions that Oscar is lucky to have seen how nobles fight. Oscar humors him and even commends them for their combined efforts at defensive magic. Hearing this, Levin is disappointed with Oscar's mediocre reaction to his so-called noble awesomeness. Unbeknownst to Levin, combined magic is not what Oscar wants. What he wants is to be a powerhouse on his own and do individual magic, the kind that is more powerful than the mage who killed him in his past life. Oscar also wants power that can break through the strongest magicians, including the headmaster. He worries that their current speed of training is too steady to give him that kind of result. Shortly after, Lily interrupts Oscar's thoughts to offer him a cup of coffee. She wants to thank him for saving her, even though she was supposed to be protecting him. Oscar tells her not to worry and asks her about the magic she used during battle. He wants to know why some spells were powerful while others didn't carry any strength. Levin overhears this and quickly chimes in, explaining that magic closer to the caster is more powerful. Lily yells at him to back off since the question was meant for her. Levin backs off, but not without throwing the usual commoner insult at Oscar. Lily then proceeds to properly explain the magic theory to Oscar. She explains that once magic leaves a caster, it returns to nature as mana. Oscar realizes that this is why cast magic disappears in the air. As usual, his brain begins to calculate another magic theory. Since magic formulas only activate when the right amount of mana is infused in them, Oscar wonders if a spell's effectiveness can be increased. Just then, his train of thought is interrupted when Lily complains that she might have made her coffee a little too dense. Oscar then stares into his own cup and, from her words, gets an idea. Lily tries to call his attention, but Oscar's mind wanders to his new magic theory on how to increase the effectiveness of a spell. He then finally realizes this theory is similar to using sword key. Somewhere in the forest, Professor Eamon watches Oscar and his team from a magic circle. It turns out that their whole situation was his doing, and he's impressed that Levin handled the situation. Apparently, Levin's family, the Aldrits, are famously known for being the hardest to deal with. Since Levin is an obstacle, Eamon decides to up the game to remove him from ruining his plans. Back in the main camp, Professor Ruth watches over the class as they camp out for the night. The students huddle together, shivering while Ruth stands guard. After observing them for the day, she's impressed that not many of them dropped out of the training. This reinforces her initial analysis that this year's batch of students is talented. A few moments later, Isabel arrives to switch shifts with her, and Ruth is happy to be relieved. Meanwhile, chatter erupts among the students when they see the famous Isabel. She then checks on the other students using a magic circle and is impressed with their performance. As usual, Isabel doesn't like babysitting incompetent people, but this year's first class was doing better than she expected, especially Zazan, who has been breezing through the training. There is also a silver-haired girl from the same class who never takes her eyes off her book. Just then, Isabel notices that Oscar and his group are nowhere to be seen. Ruth explains that their broadcast feed has been acting up, so she doesn't have updates about them. She then tells Isabel to ask Professor Eamon for more details. However, when Ruth looks around, she doesn't see Eamon anywhere. Back in the 5th graveyard, Levin and his group retire for the night while one of them keeps watch. However, Oscar is still lost deep in thought with his magic theories. He tries to figure out how to use mana the same way swordsmen strengthen their bodies using sword ki. Basically, swordsmen circulate, condense, and heighten their sword ki within the body. Before Oscar can finish figuring out his new theory, a sudden sense of danger hits him. Suddenly, the two guys keeping watch rush out of the bush, screaming at everyone to flee. But Levin doesn't take them seriously. Thinking they must be running from another set of puny beasts, he prepares to fight the noble way again. However, a sudden burst of flame from above them leaves everyone completely shocked. Levin begins to question his existence, while Lily realizes it's a vortex of flames. After a moment of nerve-wracking silence, a gigantic dragon emerges from the forest. It is at this very moment that Levin and his group realize they might have stumbled into worse than they bargained for. Levin wonders why a dragon would show up in what was supposed to be junior training. This is because taking down a dragon is strictly for those at the Magic Saint level. Oscar finally concludes that someone is definitely targeting them. One of the group members tells Levin to use the magic paper to call for help, but he reminds them that he tore it up an eternity ago. Since they have no other options available, Oscar suggests fighting the dragon. Lily is stunned to hear this and can't believe such a ridiculous proposal. However, Oscar lets her know that it's the only way for them to survive. Hearing this, the guys are relieved, especially since they have the unbeatable noble, Levin. With their defensive magic, they hope to hold out until the professors notice and come to their aid. After an awkward silence, Levin suddenly slams his wand into the ground. He casts an Earth Spirit shield magic, creating an Earth cocoon for himself. This leaves everyone stunned, especially his lackeys, who were counting on him for their survival. Levin calls them idiots, reminding them that his measly shield could never hold back a dragon. He then lets them know that he plans to survive alone. At this point, the boys who were counting on his protection start panicking. However, Lily decides to trust Oscar and confidently tells them that they need to fight as Oscar proposed. She then takes the lead and attacks the dragon with sharp earth spikes. At first, the boys are excited, hoping Lily's attack took down the dragon, but the dragon comes out of the attack without a single scratch. This makes them realize that they need at least advanced magic to do any damage to the dragon. Refusing to give up, Lily decides to be the bait and tells Oscar to find a way to call for help. However, Oscar ignores her instructions while he contemplates his next move. At the same time, one of the boys casts several magic spells while shaking like a water fountain. The other dude gives up completely, waiting for death to come. Just as the dragon begins to prepare another fire vortex in its mouth, Oscar finally steps forward. Lily quietly watches him, wondering what he plans to do. Oscar notes that the dragon is gathering mana from the air and using it as an energy source to power its flames. Despite the terrifying sight, Oscar remains calm and looks forward to testing his strength against that of a dragon. Since ancient times, dragons have been considered agents of disaster. They can absorb unlimited mana from nature to fuel their disastrous breath. But from it, Oscar has cooked up one of his brilliant magic theories. He wonders what would happen if he condenses and refines that natural mana the same way. As the dragon unleashes its flames, Oscar's group prepares to meet their ancestors. At the same time, Levin trembles inside his earth cocoon, hoping to be the lone survivor. Lily, on the other hand, fears for Oscar's life, but he remains calm in the face of danger. As the dragon's flame heads straight for him, Oscar casts a powerful fire bullet spell to counter it. Fortunately, his magic spell dispels the dragon flame and also headshots the dragon, ending its reign of terror. This leaves Lily speechless, and her knees hit the ground as she stares at Oscar in disbelief. Elsewhere, Eamon watches the whole battle from his magic mirror. He can't believe Oscar, a freshman, was able to one-shot a frigging dragon. Before he can figure out the type of power Oscar wields, Eamon senses that someone might be onto him, so he decides to wrap it up, but not before swearing to eliminate Oscar next time. This is because he believes that only those of noble blood are permitted to wield such power, and Oscar is just a puny commoner.
Meanwhile, Oscar is pleased with himself that his magic theory was successful. He had applied the same principles of sword key refinement to using mana, and it worked perfectly. He knows that this idea was only possible because of his identity as a former swordsman. A few moments later, the two dudes check on the dragon to make sure it's dead. They still find it hard to believe that they survived such an ordeal. Levin, who finally opens his earth cocoon, is also stunned that a commoner defeated a dragon. He can't believe that a noble like him was protected by a commoner. Lily is also in shock as she tries to figure out what she just witnessed. Suddenly, Oscar wobbles to the ground and Lily rushes to his side to check on him, but Oscar assures her that he's just a little tired from pushing himself too hard. The spell he cast was too powerful, and it drained him. He could feel his whole body burning up as if it was going to explode any moment. A few moments later, the group is frightened again when they hear a rustling sound coming from the forest. Lily wonders if another powerful beast has found them, but it turns out to be Isabel and her giant golem. Apparently, she found traces of a teleportation circle and decided to follow it. Isabel then asks them if they're okay, but the group is still too shaken to respond. Oscar calls out to her before passing out. Everyone rushes towards him while Isabel notices the dragon corpse. She instantly realizes that her star student must have done something unbelievable again. She makes up her mind to drill the students for the full story once they return to the academy. While the group worries about Oscar, Levin dreads the humiliation he's about to face when they return. As the sun hits the horizon, the group prepares to return to the academy. After his recovery, Oscar meets with Headmaster Balsamus to tell him about their adventure. Balsamus can't believe Oscar was attacked on the academy grounds. He realizes that the academy has been compromised by the dark mages targeting commoners. He then commends Oscar for coming out of the attack alive. Oscar lets him know that he survived because he decided to become stronger. He excitedly tells Balsamus that he has comprehended the first step to getting stronger. However, Balsamus advises Oscar to leave the academy. He explains that the school is no longer safe since these crazy extremists have infiltrated it. Balsamus advises him to live a quiet life outside the academy without magic. He stresses that it's the only way for Oscar to survive. Hearing this, Oscar considers his previous life and how unhappy he was despite all his achievements. Balsamus then lets him know that a lot of people live happily without magic. He also tells Oscar he can still find happiness even without magic, and advises him not to waste his life at such a young age. While listening to Balsamus's advice, Oscar recalls how happy he was practicing magic in this life with Isabel. Not willing to give that up, he confidently turns down the headmaster's advice. Oscar firmly refuses to quit after struggling to get to this point. Balsamus is stunned at his refusal, but since he has no plans to change his mind, Oscar thanks Balsamus for his concern. Since the person targeting him is inside the academy, Oscar tells Balsamus that he has an idea to draw them out. This piques Balsamus's interest, and he asks Oscar to tell him about the plan. Oscar then boldly declares that he'll simply be the bait and drag them out of the shadows. Balsamus is stunned to hear this and asks Oscar if he's not afraid to die. Oscar boldly lets him know that he doesn't plan to join his ancestors anytime soon. His response makes Balsamus laugh like Oscar just cracked some funny Kevin Hart-level joke. Oscar is surprised and wonders what he said to make the old geezer laugh. Seeing the puzzled look on Oscar's face, Balsamus quickly apologizes. Since Oscar is determined to fight back, Balsamus decides to support him. The two of them then shake hands to seal their newfound partnership. Afterwards, Balsamus tells Oscar to get a new magic wand. Oscar is confused, but when he checks his wand, he realizes that it is completely damaged. Later on, Oscar approaches Isabel and she gives him a temporary wand. Since he plans to get a new one, Isabel gives him another beginner's wand. Oscar asks her if a wand is absolutely necessary for mages. Isabel lets him know that it's difficult to write with only fingers. To show him what she means, Isabel dips her finger in ink and explains that the wand is like a writing instrument, and mana is like ink. Basically, magic formulas can be drawn without a writing instrument, but they would look wobbly. Isabel further explains that to create perfect and beautiful magic, one must invest in writing tools. After his meeting with Isabel, Oscar heads out to buy a wand. While waiting at the academy gate, he carefully stares at his old wand and can't believe it broke after one battle. He wonders if the tool couldn't withstand the mana he refined during the dragon fight.
Before Oscar can finish processing his thoughts, Lily's voice interrupts him. She apologizes for keeping him waiting, and Oscar apologizes for making her escort him during her day off. Lily assures him that she doesn't mind, since she planned to also buy something. With that, they happily head out to help Oscar buy a wand. A few moments later, they arrive at the first store, and Oscar is amazed to see so many different wands. The shopkeeper proudly boasts about his wand collection. He then proceeds to bring out one of the most expensive ones, dazzled with precious gems. He even assures Oscar that this particular wand will make people respect him. Oscar wonders if these gems have their own special effect on a spell. However, Lily quietly reminds him to check the price before asking questions. Oscar's jaw drops when he sees the crazy price on the magic wand. Lily then suggests they check other stores since this one is above budget. However, the next store is even more expensive than the last, causing them to flee. After running away from a few more stores, Oscar and Lily finally give up. After running around all day, Oscar finally realizes that magic wands are expensive and he's too broke to afford anything decent. Lily explains that they're expensive because many mages are from noble households, and nobles mostly focus on keeping up their proud appearance. Oscar then apologizes for taking up Lily's time and lets her know that he'll continue looking on his own. But Lily refuses to leave and enthusiastically promises to stay until Oscar finds a wand. They then continue their search, and Oscar stumbles upon a magic wand store. But another shopkeeper suddenly warns them not to enter the shop. When Oscar asks why, he explains that the shopkeeper is crazy and forces customers to buy what they don't want. Oscar stares at the shop for a while, and despite the warning, he still decides to check it out. Lily tries to stop him and lets him know that they might not be able to leave the shop until they buy something. However, Oscar refuses to listen to her advice and happily opens the door. He points out that the store has gone out of business, so it must be legit. Upon entering, they're met with a dark, eerie space that makes Lily's skin crawl. They soon notice a wand maker named Rod carving nearby, and without looking at them, he asks if they're browsing or buying. Oscar tells him that he wants to buy a new wand. Rod drops his tools and questions why they chose his shop out of all the other proper shops. He then turns to glare at them with his carving knife still in his hands. But despite his tough look, Oscar remains calm. After a brief stare down, Rod suddenly turns hostile. He throws the knife at Oscar while yelling at him for making fun of his business. Oscar swiftly dodges the knife while Lily is left completely speechless. Oscar then lets Rod know that he didn't come to play, but that only infuriates Rod, and he declares that he doesn't sell wands to swordsmen. Oscar is surprised to hear this, while Lily, convinced this dude is shady, tries to make Oscar leave the shop. But to her surprise, Oscar excitedly declares that he'll stay because he finds Rod quite interesting. Lily can't believe Oscar really plans to choose a wand from this weird store. Even Rod, who was trying to act tough, is stunned by Oscar's attitude. Oscar then asks why Rod thinks he's a swordsman. Rod carefully studies Oscar for a moment from head to toe. After that, he explains that it is because Oscar tilts more to the right, which basically means he carries something heavy on his left side. Rod tells him that it is an obvious sign of someone who carries a sword. Oscar is impressed by the accuracy of Rod's analysis. Lily, on the other hand, protests that Oscar is not a swordsman, but Oscar holds his hand out to keep her back. He finds it astonishing that Rod saw through him in an instant. After a brief silence, Oscar explains to Rod that he just started learning magic. Rod is shocked that he has only been training for 6 months. Oscar then explains that his stance is because his father drilled him to become a swordsman. Therefore, the effects of his habits from back then are still lingering. Lily backs him up and assures Rod that Oscar is truly a student of the Magic Academy like her. Rod then asks Oscar why he needs a new wand, and Oscar replies that his old wand was destroyed. He shows Rod the broken wand, and after checking it, Rod lets him know that the wand is now completely useless. After closer observation, he explains that the magic circle inside the wand has been shattered. This is because too much mana was poured into the wand. Oscar doesn't understand what he means, so Rod breaks it down. He explains that larger wands can hold more mana, but their size makes them hard to handle. The large wands also require precise mana control, which makes things even more difficult. Rod further explains that this type of simple wand is perfect for beginners because of its small size, which makes it easier to handle. He then reminds Oscar that the Magic Academy professors use larger and more complicated wands because of their level in magic. From Rod's explanation, Oscar is amazed that the beginner's wand couldn't withstand his newest magic theory. He then asks Rod to recommend a wand that would suit him, but Rod lets Oscar know that he hasn't made up his mind to sell him anything. Oscar and Lily are surprised to hear this because they thought he had warmed up to them. Rod then points to his wand display and orders Oscar to pick out the best one. He reveals that he'll sell one to him if he's satisfied with Oscar's pick. Oscar then begins scanning through the display while Lily holds her breath. Her anxiety rises because she knows that a wand's value is determined by its size and the material it is made of. Basically, magic wands with rare materials are very expensive because they have a higher mana affinity. Just then, a magic wand on the top shelf of the display catches Lily's attention. After carefully studying it, she realizes that it is made from a precious wood called Haganami wood. Lily knows that the price of this wand is enough for one to live comfortably in luxury for a whole year. She silently prays for Oscar to notice the wand, but her prayers go unanswered. As usual, everything with Oscar is crazy as his eyes land on the most unremarkable wand in the store. He picks up the wand and waves it around like he just won the lottery and proudly declares that he'll settle for it. Lily is speechless, and Rod is stunned by his choice. Lily hurriedly points to the most expensive wand and begs him to change his mind. However, Oscar lets her know that he was asked to choose a good wand, not the most expensive. Lily is puzzled as she wonders what he means by a good staff. Rod then asks him why he picked that particular one. Oscar replies that he simply chose it because of a warm feeling. Rod tells him that it is just some old beat-up wand, but Oscar points out that it's still in one piece despite being old. He explains that the most terrifying thing on the battlefield is a broken weapon mid-battle. Oscar points out that the wand's function has not been compromised despite being battered on the outside. He further adds that the wand looked like it was made considering the user's needs. Rod is impressed with Oscar's words and quietly steps away, leaving them puzzled. Before he leaves, Oscar asks if he plans to sell him the wand, but Rod says it's not for sale. He explains that he made it for his son a long time ago. Oscar and Lily are surprised by this revelation, and Lily wonders why it was kept on display since it's not for sale. Rod reveals that it's because the owner broke before the wand did. However, he refuses to go into any more details about the death of his son. He simply tells Oscar that the wand is too old and cannot be considered a good wand anymore. He then quietly heads back to his workstation while Lily decides it's time for them to leave. She promises to stay with Oscar until he finds a place to buy a good wand. Oscar is a bit disappointed that Rod didn't sell him one because their interaction was quite interesting. But just as they turn to leave the shop, Rod calls them back, leaving Oscar surprised. He tells Oscar to wait while he gets a wand that suits him. Lily and Oscar are excited when they hear this because all their hard work has finally paid off. The moment Rod leaves to get the wand, Lily heaves a sigh of relief. She had been so nervous since the moment they walked into the store. Oscar apologizes for troubling her and asks if she's curious about the kind of wand Rod plans to give him. Unfortunately, Lily's nerves are still settling, and she isn't excited about this particular adventure. However, she can tell that Oscar is clearly enjoying the whole thing. Suddenly, Eamon arrives at the shop and is stunned to see them there. Oscar and Lily are also surprised to see him, and he questions why they're there. An awkward silence falls on the room as Eamon grips his whip tightly as if preparing for a face-off. Oscar stares straight at him without blinking, while a clueless Lily happily asks Eamon if he came to buy a wand. Eamon vaguely replies just as Rod returns and cheerfully greets him. Eamon acknowledges Rod before rushing out of the shop as if being chased by debt collectors. He tells Rod that he'll be back later since Rod is busy attending to customers. Lily rushes out to see him off, but Eamon has already put some distance between them. Lily worries that they may have interrupted the professor's business with Rod. Throughout the exchange, Oscar remains calm and quiet. A few seconds later, Rod cleans up the magic wand and hands it to Oscar as his new companion. Oscar's eyes light up like Christmas Eve as they scan over the not-so-pretty magic wand. Lily recognizes that the wand was crafted from a precious tree known as the Origin Tree. Apparently, this great tree is a giant tree that is found in a certain island nation. It grows in any climate, and no matter how harsh the environment, its trunk never withers nor decays, and its leaves remain ever radiant while its branches are replaced in cycles after several decades. Lily is shocked to see a wand made from the Origin Tree's branch because it is known as the best material and considered a rare treasure. Rod is impressed that Lily knows her onions, and he lets her know that the wand can withstand a crazy amount of mana. Out of all the numerous pros of this wand, this is the only one that piques Oscar's interest. But before he can celebrate, Lily reminds him of how they ran away from several shops because of their measly budget. Oscar's excitement immediately vanishes the moment he remembers this. Nonetheless, Rod still hands him the wand, telling him that it isn't for sale. He explains that it was crafted as a gift for his late son. He planned to give it to him after his return from the front lines, but the boy didn't make it. Oscar carefully collects the wand like a fragile egg while Rod returns to his station. He assures them that he doesn't need payment for the wand. When they remain silent, Rod firmly repeats himself, telling them that he has no intention of selling a different wand to Oscar. He explains that it is because no other wands in his shop suit Oscar. Convinced, Oscar tightly holds on to his new gear and humbly thanks Rod for the gift. Rod quickly dismisses him and tells him to test the wand. Oscar then holds the wand properly as he closes his eyes to channel mana into it. Rod carefully observes as Oscar connects with his wand. At the same time, Oscar can feel a weird sensation as he pours mana into the wand. Even though it's his first time using the wand, this sensation makes him feel like he has wielded it for a long time. The moment Oscar finishes, Rod barks at them to leave his store quickly. He claims that he needs to open the store to actual paying customers. Before leaving, Oscar decides to ask about Eamon's appearance. He asks Rod if Eamon frequently comes to the shop. A few days later, Oscar's classmates stare at him and Lily as they chatter about their encounter in the 5th graveyard. The school already chalked up the accident to a faulty teleportation circle. Everyone is amazed that Oscar and his group made it back in one piece. They even gossip about how Levin acted like a total coward and grit their teeth, roasting him for being a wimp. Suddenly, the sound of a whip cracks, causing the class to fall silent as Eamon arrives. He then scolds them for ignoring his esteemed presence and whispering during his class. Terrified, the students all apologize in unison while Oscar calmly stares at the professor. Rod had told him that Eamon was the captain of his late son's squad. Apparently, Eamon was there on the battlefield when Rod's son died, and he was also the one who brought the news to Rod. After the boy's passing, Eamon brought back the old wand as a memento for Rod. Lily was emotional when she heard the story. Rod even praised Eamon for being a good guy, and he told them how Eamon was nice to his commoner son despite being a noble himself. Oscar's eyes widened when he heard this and pointed out that Rod's son must have been more incredible at magic than nobles since his wand looked heavily used. Rod was stunned to hear this and wondered how Oscar knew that his son was an exceptional mage. After hearing Rod's story, Oscar had finally gotten the answer he had been looking for. He also notes that Eamon was one of the professors in charge of the field training, which makes him a suspect. After much thought, Oscar finally concludes that Eamon is definitely the mastermind behind the attack on his life. Oscar remains calm, and since Eamon hasn't realized that his cover is blown, he decides to use this as his chance to strike first. Later, Eamon checks in with his organization via a communication magic circle. The sinister voice praises Eamon for successfully completing his mission on the battlefield. They commend him for doing exceptionally and going above their expectations. The voice also reminds him that they expect him to accomplish the same result at the Magic Academy. Eamon is visibly uneasy as he replies that he will do as expected. As if sensing his hesitation, the voice asks him if the school mission is harder than the battlefield. Eamon hurriedly replies that it is not, and the voice lets him know that they require quick results. After the transmission ends, Eamon remains in the same spot, clearly worried.
Meanwhile, at the headmaster's office, Oscar reveals his findings to the headmaster. Balsamus is shocked to learn that Eamon was the one behind the attack. He finds it hard to believe because Eamon is considered a hero who can risk his life for his comrades. Oscar tells Balsamus that he knows about Eamon's heroic deeds, but he's certain that he's the culprit. Seeing how determined Oscar is, Balsamus decides to take his word for it. However, he lets Oscar know that he can't make any move without concrete evidence. Oscar calmly declares that he's going to be the evidence. Balsamus is puzzled to hear this, but Oscar explains that he's going to bait Eamon to strike as he did during the training. He wants to create a situation with few witnesses to bait Eamon into striking again. Oscar is sure that Eamon will not let go of such an opportunity to come after him. As Balsamus considers the idea for a moment, his eyes fall on a note on his table. The note details an escort mission for the Imperial Princess, so it's the perfect opportunity to lay a trap, as Oscar suggested. Apparently, the Imperial Princess, Ariel, was supposed to enroll in the first class. However, her enrollment was delayed due to a backlash from the hereditary magic passed down through generations of the royal family. During class, Ruth tells the class about Ariel's situation and announces the mission to escort Ariel back to school. Basically, a group will be sent to the Imperial capital to bring her back to school. Ruth had gathered the most exceptional students of the first class for the mission, including Oscar, Zazan, and the quiet girl who does nothing but bury her face in a book all day. Oscar notes that this mission is truly perfect to bait Eamon into targeting him. After briefing them on the mission, Ruth asks if they have any questions, and Zazan raises his hand. As usual, he decides to pick on his favorite commoner, Oscar. Since everyone on the mission is considered exceptionally talented, Zazan asks Ruth if Oscar's power matches theirs. To his shock, Ruth replies that it does, and further adds that Oscar's power has even surpassed the class based on his performance on the field training. Zazan is both shocked and confused to hear this, while the bookworm girl shows no reaction. Despite Ruth's assessment, Zazan refuses to accept it. He boldly states that Oscar is barely at Mana apprentice level, and from what he noticed, he can't even use basic magic. Oscar remains calm while listening to Zazan roast him. Like some jealous brat, Zazan whines that he doesn't get why everyone praised Oscar despite his mediocre talent. He witnessed Isabel and the headmaster praise Oscar. Now Ruth had joined them. Zazan refuses to accept this, especially with the recent field training grading where Oscar surpassed everyone. Frustrated by all this, Zazan angrily challenges Oscar to a duel, telling him to show him this so-called power that has been driving everyone crazy. Oscar is taken aback by the challenge because he was just trying to mind his business. Ruth is frustrated that this mission to escort the princess might be doomed, with the team acting like over-entitled brats. To make sure nothing disrupts the team spirit, Ruth agrees to the duel and announces that the loser will be removed from the escort mission. Without hesitation, Zazan accepts the duel, while Oscar remains in the background like a supporting character. Before he can figure out what's happening, Oscar finds himself in the battleground in a match he didn't even consent to. As he stares at his staff, Oscar wonders how the hell things came to this point. While he's still questioning his very existence, Zazan eagerly prepares to show off his superiority as a noble. The moment he raises his wand, Zazan casts a spell summoning huge icicles above Oscar. He then yells at Oscar to get ready to face his wrath.
At the same time, Oscar makes up his mind to face this fight head-on, knowing he has bigger fish to fry. Besides, losing the duel is not an option because of his plan to bait Eamon on the escort mission. After sorting his thoughts, Oscar finally accepts Zazan's challenge. Although praised by everyone for being a talented genius of the House Gilochis, Zazan struggles with an inferiority complex that no one knows about. He's a perfectionist who is never satisfied. Even though everyone praises him, Zazan is never satisfied with his skills. Apparently, among the families specialized in ice magic, House Gilochis is considered the strongest lineage. However, compared to his perfect brother, Zazan feels insignificant. Zazan lacked innate talent for magic growing up, so he worked twice as hard as everyone else. He wanted badly to live up to the expectations of those around him and catch up to his brother. More than anything, Zazan challenged Oscar because he wanted to be a mage worthy of the noble Gilochis' name. Shortly after, Zazan unleashes his powerful ice spear magic, but Oscar swiftly dodges them. Zazan commends him for dodging the attacks and decides to up his game. He uses the Great Freeze spell to trap Oscar, making it impossible for him to move. Oscar's hand and wand freeze over, and Oscar manages to cast a fire spell, releasing himself from Zazan's freeze spell. Zazan is stunned that Oscar dispelled his magic in such a short time. The two of them then stare each other down as they wait for the other to make their next move. Meanwhile, Ruth observes the match from a distance, while the bookworm girl sits in a corner, uninterested in the blatant show of toxic masculinity. As the fight continues, Ruth is impressed that Oscar broke through Zazan's ice by surrounding himself with flames. She notes that his movements seem like those of someone who is familiar with battles. However, after her observation, she believes that Zazan's mana capacity is greater than Oscar's. Therefore, Oscar getting overwhelmed by Zazan's sheer force is only a matter of time. Just as she predicted, Oscar is soon surrounded by Zazan's ice spears. Believing he has this win in the bag, Zazan smugly commends Oscar for possessing exceptional talent for a commoner. But he still believes that is nothing compared to all his years of practice and experience. Zazan then casts another powerful ice spear magic as he prepares to finish Oscar to prove his superiority. Suddenly, a bizarre thing happens that makes even the bookworm girl, who never looks up, lift her head from her precious book. Ruth stares in shock as Oscar rises from the ground, shrouded in mana. Oscar then apologizes for keeping Zazan waiting, as if he had been warming up the whole time. He explains that he was taking his sweet time to prepare, and this leaves Zazan confused. Oscar confidently lets Zazan know that he's about to go on the offensive, but Zazan tells him that it is too late for any show. He then unleashes his final strike, a powerful ice seal prison, to trap Oscar. This takes Oscar by surprise because he didn't even see it coming. Oscar notes that the move must have been hidden within Zazan's earlier ice spear attack. However, he remains calm because his mana refinement is already complete, and Zazan's little ice prison is just child's play for him now. He's confident that his new magic wand can withstand the same move that took down the dragon during field training. As Zazan tries to trap him in the ice prison, Oscar uses the Fireblade spell to completely destroy the ice seal prison with a single strike. Zazan is shocked that his ultimate move was countered. Ruth is also stunned, and the bookworm girl also seems to pay attention to the fight. Oscar, on the other hand, is ecstatic that his magic is going as he envisioned. The flow of mana makes his body feel light, and his spells manifest perfectly without any flaws or delay. Oscar finds all this thrilling, while Zazan is not having the best day as Oscar's spell breaks through his defense. He can't believe a commoner shattered his defensive spell so easily. Just as he's about to curse as usual, Oscar walks closer to him. As he watches Oscar getting closer, Zazan can't help but think about his big brother. Back then, all Zazan wanted was to become like his brother. However, his brother always believed that Zazan overestimated him. He never considered himself extraordinary, insisting that there were countless people in the world who could make him look insignificant by comparison. Now, as he watches Oscar standing before him, Zazan finally understands what his brother meant. At last, Oscar closes the distance between them, and just as he raises his wand to strike, Ruth calls for the duel to end. Declaring that the winner has already been decided, she stops the match while Zazan quietly surrenders, staring at the wand pointed directly at his chest. Elsewhere, Levin is angrily throwing tantrums, questioning his existence. After the field training, his acts of cowardice spread throughout the school, and everyone talked trash behind his back. Levin is fed up with everyone giving him hostile looks, and he blames Oscar for the humiliation. A sudden knock on the door draws his attention, and Levin angrily opens the door, yelling at the top of his lungs. He is shocked to see Professor Eamon on the other side of the door. The following day, as Zazan steps into the class, his eyes meet with Oscar's, and they stare at each other for a while. After their duel, Zazan told Oscar that he envied him. He couldn't accept that his years of practice were turned to dust because of Oscar's talent. Oscar offered him a hand to help him up, but Zazan pushed his hand away. He then boldly promised to surpass Oscar, no matter how long it took him. Though Oscar welcomed the challenge, he also plans to keep moving until his so-called talent is beyond anyone's reach. Now that his spot in the escort mission was secured, Oscar looks forward to dealing with Eamon the following day.
Later during class, Ruth announces that she will be conducting another mana measurement session. Just then, Levin strolls into the classroom, looking calmer and with his right arm bandaged. Ruth lets him know that he's late for class, but Levin completely ignores her. He heads straight for his seat, ignoring all the side talks and mockery from the students. He briefly pauses when he sees Oscar, but then quietly sits down, ignoring him. Oscar senses something wrong and wonders what happened to Levin's arm. A few moments later, Ruth yells for the class to shut up as she proceeds with the mana measurement. After class, Lily praises Oscar for increasing his mana capacity in such a short time. Oscar says it's thanks to his new wand, which now feels like a part of himself. Lily wonders if she should also get a new wand at Rod's store. Suddenly, Levin stops him, drawing the attention of a few nearby students who continue mocking him behind his back. Rather than starting a fight, Levin bluntly asks Oscar to teach him how to become stronger. Caught off guard, Oscar asks what exactly he means. Irritated, Levin tells him to stop playing dumb and reveals that he already knows Oscar's secret. The statement immediately puts Oscar on edge, leaving him wondering what Levin could possibly know about him. A short while later, Oscar follows Levin to the training grounds, surprised to see that Levin had even reserved the place for their late-night meeting. Wanting answers, Oscar asks what secret Levin is talking about, but Levin accuses him of pretending to be clueless. Levin then claims that the power Oscar used to defeat the dragon was granted to him by someone else. By this point, Oscar is more confused than ever, wondering what kind of nonsense Levin is talking about. This infuriates Levin further as he believes that Oscar is trying to toy with his noble intelligence. He then starts yelling as he laments that everyone treats him like a fool. Suddenly, Levin's bandages tear off as his hands swell, revealing that one of his arms has turned into a monstrous spiked arm. This sudden turn of events leaves Oscar completely bewildered as he watches Levin's arm morph into something else. Even Levin is confused by the transformation since he probably skipped reading the terms and conditions like me. Oscar quickly checks on him, but Levin has no idea what is happening to him. Since he was probably promised some Iron Man-level transformation, Levin complains that this isn't what he ordered. Unfortunately, his Temu-ordered robotic arm continues to transform, putting him in great pain. At the same time, several spikes emerge from the ground, almost skewering Oscar like a rotisserie chicken. Fortunately, he swiftly dodges the spikes while carefully observing Levin. Oscar notes that Levin is moving like someone under something's control. Remembering that Levin said something about receiving power, Oscar finally figures out who might be the mastermind. Meanwhile, Levin continues to lament about his pathetic life and refuses to accept that he messed up during the field training. He doesn't believe he did anything wrong by wanting to survive on his own. As if finally feeling the weight of what he did to his group members, Levin reveals that he truly wanted to protect everyone, if only he had the power to. While he's distracted, Oscar uses the opportunity to charge in. Levin takes a swing at him with his ugly arm, but Oscar easily dodges the strike. Before Levin can make another move, Oscar knocks him out cold from behind before gently laying him down on the ground. Afterwards, he barks at Eamon for using an innocent dude as a pawn in his games. Oscar knows that Eamon must be watching the whole thing nearby, so he calls out to him to show his face. Just as Oscar notices crows swirling above him, Eamon appears amidst them. With his whip in hand, he boldly scolds Oscar for being an insolent commoner. Eamon hovers in the sky as if floating on a crack in the sky while crows surround him. He then narrates how he plans to weave the story for the Academy after finishing Oscar. Eamon plans to report that Oscar and Levin were training when one of them went out of control, resulting in a fatal accident. Ignoring his boring tales, Oscar immediately attacks him with fire magic, but Eamon effortlessly dispels it as if controlling the fire on a walk. Annoyed with the little fire inconvenience, Eamon threatens to make Oscar bend the knee. With that, he summons several wolf familiars, and they charge in to attack Oscar. While fighting them off, Oscar's mind wanders off to his conversation with the headmaster. Balsamus had warned him that Eamon possesses a powerful familiar controlling magic. He controls them by carving magic formulas into monster corpses to manipulate like puppets. Unfortunately, he can only control a limited number of familiars. Balsamus had revealed that the only way to handle the familiars is to ignore Eamon and prioritize destroying the familiars. Balsamus also warned Oscar to stay sharp because Eamon might have other tricks up his sleeve since he's at the Magic Saint level. Even though Balsamus had sternly warned him not to face Eamon alone, Oscar had no choice. His original plan had been to properly strategize with Balsamus during the escort mission, but he never expected Eamon to make his move so soon. Now that an innocent student has been dragged into the conflict, Oscar has no intention of backing down. As he struggles against the wolf familiars, Levin's agonized screams echo through Oscar's mind. Fueled by that memory, Oscar grits his teeth and unleashes a powerful fire spell, finally destroying the wolf familiars. From the look on Oscar's face, Eamon can immediately tell that he's furious and asks him why. He wonders if Oscar is fighting this hard because of Levin. Oscar admits that he is angry on Levin's behalf, but Eamon only laughs in response. He reminds Oscar that the two of them are hardly friends since they teamed up only once during field training. But to Oscar, that alone is enough reason to feel responsible for Levin's life. Eamon then tells him that Levin doesn't feel the same way. He reveals that Levin sought greater power solely to exact revenge on Oscar. According to Eamon, Levin sees Oscar as nothing more than an enemy, and a lowly commoner at that. Despite the obvious attempt to provoke him, Oscar refuses to waver, leaving Eamon puzzled. Oscar calmly tells him that he doesn't care how Levin sees him. As he prepares to attack once more, Oscar declares that Levin made his choices because he wanted the strength to become stronger. Then, with unwavering determination, he states that he can never forgive Eamon for exploiting Levin's vulnerability. Unfortunately, before Oscar can cast his fire spell again, his magic formula shatters into pieces, leaving him confused. He soon realizes that he cannot construct magic formulas properly. As Eamon's feet finally touch the ground, he declares that his organization cannot allow talented commoners to exist. He then reveals that he made perfect arrangements, knowing that Oscar has exceptional talent for magic. While Oscar's magic formulas continue to fail, Eamon summons his gigantic elephant, Familiar. Oscar carefully observes the scene and finally realizes that Eamon's familiars have been absorbing his mana the whole time and interfering with his magic. Despite the tricky situation, Oscar remains calm and lets Eamon know that he came prepared. But Eamon believes he has covered all escape routes as he summons more of his vicious wolf familiars. Even though the formation prevents him from also drawing magic formulas like Oscar, Eamon feels he has the upper hand. He proudly reveals that the magic formulas carved into his familiars will continue to operate even though he can't draw new ones. With that, he decides to send Oscar to meet his ancestors as he surrounds him from all sides with familiar beasts. Despite being at a clear disadvantage, Oscar remains remarkably calm in the face of such a hopeless situation. However, the experience makes him finally understand how all the talented mages were defeated so easily by Eamon. Oscar realizes that it wasn't simply a matter of strength, but they had been overwhelmed by fear and driven into despair. As he recalls the moment he held Rod's son's magic wand, Oscar instinctively clutches his chest. He can only imagine how painful it must have been for the boy to lose his magic while being surrounded by monsters, completely powerless to fight back. Filled with unwavering determination, Oscar prepares himself for battle, ready to teach Eamon a harsh lesson about messing with the wrong person. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, he receives a visit from Ruth, who brought some documents for him to review. Ruth wants to know if everything is because of the mission, and Balsamus tells her that they have to make sure that nothing happens to the princess. Upon looking at the documents, he realizes that there are even more requests from the students to use the training grounds that year than in the previous years. Ruth tells him that this is commendable and shows how dedicated their students are. Just then, she mentions something important, revealing that Levin has started a personal studying session with Eamon. The moment Balsamus hears this, something clicks in his head. Back on the battlefield, Oscar has now come to the painful realization that as long as the annoying familiar remains active, no new magic formulas can be created. However, there is something important that he has noticed, and this is the fact that the familiar's summoning magic is being maintained, which means there is obviously another way to manifest a magic formula. Oscar is trying to rack his brain on what to do when one of the monsters unleashes a sneak attack on him from behind. The monster lunges at him, grabbing his left arm, and Eamon believes the deed is done. Oscar, on the other hand, is not ready to give up, and as he closes his eyes, he conjures a massive fire bullet that cuts through the monster and even hits the elephant familiar. Eamon freaks out when he sees this, and he starts asking Oscar how he is able to use magic in a situation like this. Oscar shocks him by revealing that he saw the magic formula inside the familiar's body, which means he can cast magic as long as it is not exposed to the air. Oscar's left arm is left bloodied, but Eamon is more concerned with the fact that Oscar is claiming that he can see the formula inside the familiar's body. Eamon then asks Oscar how he did what he did because he didn't use his wand, and Oscar lets him know that he can manifest a magic formula without his wand. Sweat runs down Eamon's face in disbelief as he doesn't want to accept the fact that Oscar is able to cast magic of that insane caliber with nothing but his fingers. Oscar prepares to take the offensive, but Eamon is not ready to accept defeat, and he unleashes a bunch of magic circles. However, this doesn't do him much good as everything is overwhelmed and destroyed by Oscar's refined fire. Eamon watches in panic as his magic is being overwhelmed. He considers this abnormal since he is a seasoned mage and he accuses Oscar of hiding his true abilities. Nonetheless, he doesn't think Oscar can use the same attack consecutively, but Oscar lets him know that he doesn't need to do it again. Eamon looks closely and realizes that his wand has been damaged, which basically means he is now powerless. Fear overtakes him, and Oscar asks him how long he thinks he can last without his wand. Eamon shamelessly goes on his knees, begging Oscar to spare him. Eamon promises to leave Oscar alone, and even assures him that he is going to tell him everything he wants to know. He is desperate enough to tell Oscar that he is going to recommend him for the Magic Apprentice rank, which is a huge proof of being a mage. However, Oscar is not moved by any of this, and he asks Eamon if he is done making his offers. He assures Eamon that he has no intention of killing him because he wants him to confess everything he's done. Just then, Eamon dashes off toward the elephant familiar and decides to do something desperate just so he doesn't lose to Oscar, whom he calls a mere commoner. Eamon activates a last resort magic circle that encompasses him and the elephant familiar, which immediately starts to merge him with the familiar. Oscar watches in horror and surprise as Eamon completely merges with the familiar. Before he knows it, Eamon starts attacking recklessly, smashing the ground and forcing Oscar backwards. Oscar realizes that the dude is completely gone, and just as Oscar prepares to unleash everything he has in an attempt to kill Eamon, a wind barrier appears out of nowhere, trapping Eamon in place. The headmaster makes sure to aura farms as he descends from above, commending Oscar that he's done well, but urges him to leave the rest to the big boys.